In an age defined by endless debates on social media, in politics, and even casual conversations, we seem more obsessed than ever with arguing our points. From comment sections to televised panels, modern discourse revolves around one goal: to win. But this obsession with being right reveals a deeper tension, one that philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche saw not as progress, but as a symptom of cultural malaise. For Nietzsche, the compulsion to argue is not a sign of intellectual strength, but a mark of existential insecurity. Constant debate, he warned, reflects a denial of deeper instincts and a retreat into hollow rationalization. Nietzsche challenged the Enlightenment faith in reason, arguing that human beings are not primarily rational creatures, but instinctual ones. Our tendency to elevate reason above all else, especially in moral and philosophical arguments, alienates us from life itself. In his view, living authentically means embracing our instincts, creating our own values, and rejecting the herd mentality that demands validation through consensus. This essay will explore Nietzsche's critique of argument culture through several key themes: the conflict between reason and instinct, the moralism that stifles vitality, the ideal of the Übermensch who transcends conventional discourse, and the paralysis caused by overthinking. Ultimately, Nietzsche invites us to stop arguing and start becoming, to shift from proving ourselves to being ourselves. True strength, he suggests, is not found in winning debates, but in living beyond the need to win them at all. The culture of argumentation, a symptom of fragility. In contemporary society, the impulse to argue has become a cultural reflex, often mistaken for strength or intellectual rigor. Yet beneath this facade lies a deeper truth. Humanity's fixation on debate is frequently a mask for internal insecurity. When individuals are uncertain of their beliefs or identities, they may cling to argumentation as a shield, proving themselves not through action or authenticity, but through contradiction and critique. This habit of endless argumentation diverts vital energy away from creativity and meaningful living. Instead of building, exploring, or connecting, people become entangled in verbal sparring that rarely leads to resolution. Time that could be spent engaging with life is consumed by attempts to dominate or defend. The result is a social atmosphere marked by tension rather than growth, where opinions are hurled like weapons and silence is seen as weakness. Social media offers a stark example. Platforms designed for connection have evolved into battlegrounds of hot takes, reaction videos, and public takedowns. Political debates, once intended to clarify policy and inform the public, often devolve into theatrical performances designed to win rather than understand. These displays do little to change minds. They merely reinforce tribal identities and feed the ego. Nietzsche recognized this phenomenon long before Twitter. He saw endless arguing not as a show of strength, but as a symptom of weakness. To Nietzsche, the truly strong individual acts from a place of inner conviction and creative force, not the need to convince others. He writes of the will to power as the drive to shape the world through one's own values, not through endless disputes over existing ones. Ultimately, the culture of argumentation reflects a deeper discomfort with uncertainty and vulnerability. Genuine strength lies not in having the last word, but in having the courage to live without needing to constantly defend or prove oneself. Creation, not contention, is the mark of a resilient spirit. The elevation and limitations of reason. The legacy of Socrates enshrined reason as humanity's highest virtue, the compass pointing toward truth and the foundation of moral life. Through the dialectic method, Socrates emphasized that rational inquiry could strip away illusion and uncover universal principles. His influence permeated Western thought, shaping a tradition where reason emerged not only as a tool, but as the ultimate authority in questions of knowledge, ethics, and even personal conduct. This rational ideal gained momentum through the Enlightenment, where philosophers heralded reason as the engine of progress, liberty, and scientific advancement. Debate, logic, and empirical observation came to define intellectual legitimacy. Moral systems, too, were increasingly expected to pass the tests of rational coherence and universality, sidelining myth, tradition, and emotional intuition. However, Friedrich Nietzsche offered a sharp counterpoint. He warned that reason, once elevated beyond its practical scope, transforms into a form of tyranny, a cold, calculating force that suppresses the deeper, instinctual energies of life. To Nietzsche, the Western obsession with rationality betrayed a fear of the chaotic, creative, and passionate aspects of existence. In silencing instinct, society risked becoming sterile and detached from the vital forces that give life meaning and urgency. Indeed, in critical moments, decisions about danger, love, loyalty, or purpose, instinct often proves swifter and more reliable than reason. While rational analysis hesitates, instinct acts. Rooted in evolution and honed by survival, our instincts carry a wisdom that precedes language and logic. They anchor us in the present and steer us through ambiguity when reason falters under complexity or doubt. Thus, while reason remains indispensable, it is not infallible nor all-encompassing. A fuller human experience requires balance, a dialogue between the analytic mind and the intuitive heart. Reason may guide, but instinct often knows the terrain. Wisdom, perhaps, lies in learning when to listen to each. Instinct as a source of strength. Instinct can be defined as spontaneous, unreflective, life-affirming action. It is the body's natural, immediate response to a situation, unburdened by hesitation or excessive thought. Far from being irrational, instinct often represents a deeply rooted form of intelligence shaped by experience, evolution, and the unconscious mind. In moments of danger, instinct often proves superior to overthinking. A hiker, startled by a rattlesnake, leaps back without conscious deliberation. A driver swerves just in time to avoid a crash, guided by reflex rather than reason. These actions, arising before thought can interfere, demonstrate instinct's efficiency and reliability. Similarly, many people report gut feelings when making important life decisions, such as sensing whether a new acquaintance can be trusted or feeling drawn to a particular opportunity without knowing why. These impressions often precede logical justification, but prove accurate in hindsight. Overanalysis, by contrast, can lead to paralysis. When we dissect every possible consequence or endlessly second-guess our motives, we stall. This paralysis not only hinders decisive action, but also saps vitality and confidence. Life's opportunities often appear fleetingly. Hesitation can mean their loss. Instinct empowers us to seize the moment. However, this does not mean instinct should replace reason. Rather, we must trust the body's wisdom in harmony with rational thought. The body and mind are not in opposition, but are partners in navigating the world. When we allow reason to listen to instinct rather than suppress it, we act with both immediacy and depth. Friedrich Nietzsche argued that modern society had grown too cerebral and disconnected from the instinctual forces that give life its intensity and direction. He urged a return to instinct, not as animal impulse, but as a vital source of strength and authenticity. Reclaiming instinct for Nietzsche was part of becoming whole and truly alive. It meant recovering our natural vitality, courage, and capacity to act without fear. In a world prone to hesitation and doubt, instinct offers clarity, power, and an unshakable foundation for living fully. The paralysis of overthinking and moral constraint. Excessive reflection, while often mistaken for wisdom, can become a barrier to action. When individuals become trapped in a loop of overanalysis, dissecting every possible consequence or motive, they lose the capacity for decisive movement. This paralysis of the will stifles spontaneity and courage, replacing instinctual vitality with hesitation and doubt. Action demands risk and immediacy. Overthinking neutralizes this by replacing clarity with complexity, often leading to inaction or regret. Layered atop this mental inertia are rigid moral systems that suppress natural human impulses. Societies codify behaviors into moral rights and wrongs, creating frameworks that often punish authenticity. In Friedrich Nietzsche's view, morality was not a divine truth, but a historical construct, devised by the weak to restrain the strong. It was a tool of social control, born from resentment, the deep-seated envy and bitterness of those who lacked power. By labeling strength, ambition, and passion as evil, the weak ensured their own moral superiority and undermined the vitality of the more powerful. These inherited moral values, along with entrenched social conventions, drain individuals of their freedom and energy. Conformity becomes a virtue, while rebellion and instinct are condemned. The individual, instead of living creatively and courageously, is coerced into a life of obedience and guilt. Social norms dictate what one ought to do, rather than what one desires to do, slowly suffocating the individual's inner voice. The result is a life burdened by internal conflict. Natural desires are repressed in favor of socially sanctioned behavior, leading to frustration, resentment, and self-loathing. One becomes both jailer and prisoner, chained by the fear of moral condemnation. Nietzsche urged humanity to transcend this inherited morality, to create values rooted in strength, life affirmation, and individuality. Only then can the paralysis be broken, and the self reclaim its power to act freely and fully. The Übermensch, the ideal of self-overcoming. Friedrich Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch, often translated as Overman or Superman, represents an ideal of radical self-overcoming. Rather than aspiring to external validation or inherited moral frameworks, the Übermensch breaks free from the herd morality that dominates modern society. This figure rejects values rooted in guilt, submission, and self-denial, choosing instead to forge a unique path grounded in personal strength, creativity, and affirmation of life. At its core, the Übermensch embodies a continual process of transformation. It is not a static state to be achieved, but an ongoing act of becoming. This requires immense courage, the courage to question the foundations of one's beliefs, to abandon the comfort of conformity, and to embrace the uncertainty and chaos inherent in authentic living. The Übermensch lives without guarantees, without the false security offered by traditional religion, nationalism, or societal norms. Crucially, the Übermensch is not an ideal of domination over others, but of mastery over the self. This figure creates values rather than inheriting them, becoming, in Nietzsche's words, the poet of one's own life. In this sense, the Übermensch is an artist of existence, shaping meaning where none is given and affirming life even in its suffering and absurdity. This ideal starkly contrasts with modern morality, which Nietzsche critiques for promoting weakness, obedience, and self-sacrifice as virtues. Where traditional moral systems call for submission to higher authorities, be they divine, political, or social, the Übermensch rises above such dependency. Rather than seeing suffering as something to be avoided or redeemed through sacrifice, the Übermensch transforms it into a force for growth and creation. In sum, the Übermensch represents Nietzsche's answer to nihilism, a call to live beyond fear, beyond inherited dogma, and to courageously create a life worth living. It is an existential ideal not of perfection, but of profound authenticity and unrelenting self-renewal. True strength beyond argumentation. True strength is not found in verbal victories or the ability to dominate a conversation. It resides in the quiet courage to live authentically, even when misunderstood or opposed. In a culture that often equates argumentation with intelligence or superiority, it is easy to forget that the deepest convictions do not require constant defense. The strongest individuals are not those who always have a rebuttal ready, but those who act with integrity, regardless of approval or agreement. Too often, debates devolve into contests of ego, where the goal shifts from understanding to winning. In such arenas, truth becomes secondary to pride. The original issue fades beneath layers of emotional reaction and rhetorical maneuvering. Participants become less interested in insight and more invested in appearing right. This need to convince others stems not from confidence, but insecurity. The unspoken fear that a belief unshared is a belief unvalidated. There is a profound difference between power through words and power through action. Words can stir, manipulate, and even deceive. But action reveals character. Living one's truth with consistency, kindness, and discipline has a far greater impact than any clever argument. The person who walks away from pointless disputes, choosing instead to quietly build a meaningful life, demonstrates a strength that argumentation can never match. This is not a call to silence, but a call to discernment. Not every challenge requires a verbal counter. Not every disagreement needs resolution through debate. Instead of exhausting ourselves trying to change minds through argument, we might better serve our truth by embodying it. Let the life we live speak for what we believe. Let our choices, not our declarations, define us. In this way, strength becomes less about dominating others and more about remaining true to ourselves in a world full of noise. Friedrich Nietzsche offers a radical critique of justice and modern morality, contending that they are not neutral or noble ideals, but rather mechanisms of control favoring mediocrity. In his view, legal and moral systems function primarily to maintain societal order, often at the expense of individual vitality, strength, and creativity. These systems are designed not to uplift the exceptional, but to restrain them, ensuring that those with power, originality, and will are bound by the same rules meant to keep the weak from chaos. Nietzsche argues that modern notions of justice and equality are illusions that obscure deeper power dynamics. The supposed fairness of moral law serves as a veneer for the values of the herd, those who lack the will or strength to create meaning for themselves. In this light, justice becomes a subtle form of tyranny, where greatness is sacrificed for the comfort and security of the many. The creative individual, the one who embodies what Nietzsche calls the will to power, finds himself suffocated by norms that reward conformity and punish difference. This suppression of the strong is not accidental. It is the very function of morality as shaped by resentment, a reaction of the weak against the strong. Nietzsche calls instead for the creation of individual morality, one that is rooted in authenticity, self-overcoming, and the affirmation of life. Rather than adhering to inherited systems, one must forge values that arise from their own inner strength and creative potential. Only through this can the individual transcend the stifling weight of imposed justice and live in accordance with their highest self. Living beyond words. At the heart of it all lies a simple, potent truth. Real power is lived, not debated. The strength to shape your life does not come from winning arguments or accumulating justifications. It emerges through action, embodiment, and the courage to trust your own experience. We live in a world overflowing with commentary, opinion, and endless rationalization. But there comes a moment when clarity arrives not through more words, but through decisive movement. When we stop waiting for permission or consensus and instead lean into our instincts, that quiet knowing within, we begin to live with authenticity and direction. This is not recklessness. It's the deeper wisdom of aligning with what feels right, even when it defies explanation. Stepping beyond the realm of argument into the realm of creation is transformative. It means trading certainty for possibility, control for courage, and analysis for aliveness. It's not about ignoring thought, but about reclaiming your power from the need to constantly explain yourself. The most vital truths are often those you live, not those you debate. So, here is the final invitation. Are you ready to become the author of your own story? Not by proving yourself, but by living fully, courageously, and without apology. Beyond the noise, beyond the fear, there is a life waiting to be written. Not in theory, but in action.